If you're watching this on the Legacy of Survival channel, make sure you subscribe now, because what we're about to cover is not recycled trivia or surface-level history. This is hard-earned knowledge pulled straight from wartime reality, the kind of information that kept soldiers, resistance fighters and civilians alive when supply lines collapsed and industrial production vanished overnight. World War II wasn't just a conflict of armies, it was a global experiment in human adaptability. Ordinary people, cut off from resources, learned to turn scrap into survival. If you're a serious history enthusiast or survival-minded thinker, this episode is for you, and I encourage you to share it with others who value practical historical knowledge that still applies today. During World War II, improvisation wasn't a clever trick, it was a necessity. When factories were bombed, imports were blockaded, and standardized equipment became scarce, people had two choices: adapt or fail. Across Europe, North Africa, the Pacific and the Eastern Front, soldiers and civilians alike repurposed debris, battlefield remnants and household junk into tools that filled critical gaps. These weren't crude novelties. Many were durable, repeatable designs, refined under pressure, and they form the backbone of what we now call improvised survival engineering. Understanding why improvised tools mattered more than issued gear is essential. Standard equipment depended on logistics, and logistics collapsed quickly in prolonged conflict. When a rifle breaks, a shovel snaps, or medical supplies run out, improvisation becomes the difference between mobility and immobility, life and death. Wartime diaries and after-action reports repeatedly show that those who could fabricate replacements from scrap were more resilient than those who waited for resupply that never came. Field knives and cutting tools made from scrap steel were among the most common improvised items. Broken bayonets, saw blades, leaf springs from destroyed vehicles, and even railroad spikes were reshaped into functional blades. The process was simple but deliberate. Steel was heated in makeshift forges built from bricks, oil drums, or even dug-out fire pits. Hammering was done with rocks or scavenged metal blocks. Edges were ground against concrete or sandstone. These knives weren't elegant, but they cut rope, processed food, trimmed wood, and served as last-ditch defensive tools. The lesson here is clear. Any carbon steel object can be turned into a cutting implement if heat, abrasion, and patience are applied correctly. Improvised cooking and heating equipment reveals another layer of wartime ingenuity. Empty ammunition tins, fuel cans, and artillery shell casings were transformed into stoves and cookware. Small vent holes, punched with nails or bayonets, allowed airflow, while scavenged wire or bent scrap formed pot stands. Soldiers in winter theatres learned quickly that heat was survival. These stoves burned wood, coal dust, animal fat, or even soaked rags when nothing else was available. Modern survivalists can apply this by practicing safe ventilation and understanding fuel efficiency rather than relying solely on commercial camp stoves. Medical improvisation during the Second World War was especially sobering. With bandages and antiseptics in short supply, medics and civilians turned to boiled cloth, alcohol substitutes and plant-based treatments. Wooden splints were carved from furniture or fence posts. Tourniquets were fashioned from belts and wire. Even syringes were reused after boiling when replacements were unavailable. While modern medicine has advanced, the principle remains vital. Understanding wound stabilization and material substitution can save lives when conventional supplies are gone. Tools for shelter construction were another critical area. Nails were salvaged and straightened from bombed buildings. Hinges were cut from scrap metal. Rope was twisted from electrical wiring insulation or fabric strips. Shovels and digging tools were sometimes fabricated from flattened fuel cans attached to wooden handles. These tools allowed people to build foxholes, reinforce shelters, and repair damaged homes under constant threat. The broader lesson is that shelter building does not require perfect tools, only functional ones. Communication and signalling tools also saw remarkable improvisation. Resistance groups built radios from scavenged parts, but on a simpler level, signal mirrors were polished from scrap aluminum, whistles were carved from bone or wood, and lanterns were constructed from jars and cloth wicks. These devices enabled coordination, rescue, and warning systems without industrial support. For modern preparedness, this highlights the importance of understanding basic signaling principles rather than relying exclusively on electronics. What makes World War II improvisation especially valuable today is that it was tested under real-world stress. These weren't theoretical survival exercises. People depended on these tools daily, often for years. They refined designs based on failure, not comfort. Studying these methods trains the mind to see function where others see waste. That mindset is the true legacy of wartime survival. Applying this knowledge now doesn't require a war zone. Start by practicing controlled tool fabrication using scrap metal, wood offcuts, and discarded containers. Learn how materials behave under heat and stress. Study historical examples and recreate them safely. The goal isn't to reject modern tools, but to ensure you're not helpless without them. World War II proved that survival is not about having the best gear, but about understanding materials, physics, and human needs. Improvised tools were the quiet backbone of endurance in a broken world, and their lessons remain just as relevant today. If you value deep historical insight and practical survival knowledge rooted in real events, subscribe to the Legacy of Survival channel, share this episode with fellow historians and preparedness thinkers, and keep this knowledge alive. History only stays useful if we carry it forward.